Good afternoon, friends. Today, I have already posted a video about the recent elections both in New York and in a number of other states, mostly Democratic ones, and about the conclusions that need to be drawn based on the results. If you haven't seen it, I kindly ask you to watch the previous video. Of course, it's best to watch it before this one, but you can also watch it after the one you're watching now. Now I will talk about the effect on New York City and, in general, on the whole country. Most likely, the election and policies of, let's say, a self-proclaimed democratic socialist, actually a communist Mamdani, will have an impact. As you know, in our country, there are several layers of leadership. There is the federal government, which deals with a whole range of external or interstate affairs, and there are state governments, which handle all sorts of matters related to the state. And if you remember, a state is a separate country. And there is also local self-government, which is usually headed by the mayor of the city. Some cities in the United States are so big that they are larger and more important there than many states. In New York, taking into account temporary residents and tourists, there are about 20 million people. 20 million people. The historic city was the largest industrial center, especially in the light printing industry. Today, New York is mainly a financial, business, and cultural center, not an industrial one. So with foreign teams, Mamdani promised the city's residents a huge number of free or cheap goods and services. He promised to make the city more affordable to live in, to equalize billionaires with the poor, and basically to create a kind of paradise on Earth. Well, the kind they tried to build before in Cuba, Sudan, Venezuela, North Korea, and many other wonderful corners of the globe. If Mamdani fulfills his promises of free buses, free education, grocery stores, and other large-scale social initiatives, it will seriously increase the burden on New York City's budget and require a radical overhaul of the city's tax system. To fund the new social programs, Mamdani proposes raising the income tax for wealthy city residents by 2%. And increasing the corporate tax to 11.5%. That's how it is in New Jersey, for example. According to estimates, such measures could bring in up to $9 billion a year, which, in their view, would cover the costs of free buses, children's programs, municipal stores, and childcare. But there's another side to it. Namely, when you start raising taxes and making things worse, the very people you're trying to collect those taxes from start leaving your neighborhood, region, city, or state. Economists warn that a massive increase in the tax burden could accelerate the exodus of wealthy residents and companies from the city, and the total tax revenues in the long run are at risk of falling. Because of the loss of the tax base. When the biggest taxpayers leave. In the short term, the budget will be able to handle the announced expenses since New York City's total budget exceeds $100 billion. They will support new programs, possibly if the state agrees. That means the state should take part in this, as well as the administration, the management of new fees, in other words, tax collection. In the long term, the effect depends on how strong the reaction of the market and businesses will be. If wealthy residents and large companies start moving to Florida and Texas, the city's tax base will shrink, and it will become difficult to fund free city services. It's difficult to sustain without constantly raising taxes for everyone else. These fools who voted don't understand that it's for everyone else, not just billionaires. Free services always mean increased expenses. It will have to be compensated. Do you need to pay for a trolley bus ticket, or are there only buses instead of trams? Increasing transfers for education and social benefits? Someone has to pay for that. Implementing such programs will require at least coordination with state authorities. They might not be happy about that. And political barriers can slow down reforms or even make them impossible without significant concessions. What kind of concessions? Conclusion: if Mamdani's plans are implemented, taxes on wealthy businesses, what does wealthy mean, which is not clearly defined in New York, could rise sharply in the next 2 years. Meanwhile, the middle class will also likely face pressure. Why? Because the outflow of those who pay taxes will increase. Such a tax experiment will be attractive to some citizens, of course, because it's a freebie, but at the same time very risky for the city's stability. There won't be enough money for anything. According to current estimates, fulfilling all the key campaign promises under the supervision of Mamdani. I'll list them one more time now. Free buses, free preschool education, municipal grocery stores. A rent freeze for, I think he said, 1 million apartments will cost the city budget about $7 billion a year, above the current level of spending. A rent freeze may reduce property tax revenues, but it won't require direct budget expenditures. What will happen if builders who now find it unprofitable leave the city and stop building homes for its residents? Why? Because they won't be able to get the profits they previously expected or that they can get elsewhere. In other words, the construction business or the business of building residential housing goes wherever everyone else in the world goes, namely wherever it's better for them. So if things get worse for them, they'll leave that place. On the other hand, if in your house, let's say you own a house, there are people living there who no longer pay you, the rent doesn't go up, but inflation keeps going, so at some point you stop making a profit. Or you get so little profit that it's not enough for cleaning or for bringing the property back to a livable condition through repairs. The districts where veto O is are all the districts where restrictions have ever been introduced. So apartment buildings always become dirtier, less maintained, and almost always end up in an emergency condition. But at the same time, none of the residents of these districts move out because it's cheap there. As you can understand, these districts are already becoming hotbeds of crime and drugs. Next to devastation and neglect, these experiments have already been conducted in Baltimore, Detroit, and a number of other American cities, and today they are called ghost towns. Now, in Baltimore, only half the population still lives in the city, and in Detroit, I think it's a quarter. In general, it improves the lives of the people of a country, a city, or any society. There are two ways to improve things. One way is to take from those who have more and give it to those who have less. That is, the total will remain the same, but what everyone has will be redistributed. The other way is to produce more so that everyone has more. I had 100 now, I have 110. You had 10, now you have 20. And the difference can stay the same, if the difference is what matters to you. But from my point of view, the most important thing is to lift people out of poverty, first into a state of being poor, and then from poverty into a normal existence. That's been happening in America for over 200 years, which can be provided only and exclusively by the free market. And what we call capitalism, in fact, is the dividing line between collectivists and individualists. They believe that the main thing, collectivists believe that the main thing is for everything to be equal, fair, and almost the same. Individualists believe that we need to produce as much property as possible, improve it, make it cheaper, and then the majority of the population, whether of a country, a region, or a city, will be able to acquire this property. Especially because they are working, they have now started working, they were hired, and they receive compensation for it. Individualists do not offer compensation. They usually suggest dividing up what was stolen among the majority of the population. If you subtract the promised additional revenues and take into account the possible leakage of the tax base, the chronic budget deficit could reach $2 to $5 billion annually within 1 or 2 years after these programs start. In the long term, the inflow of new taxes and the outflow of old revenues will depend on the behavior of businesses and wealthy residents of New York City. If the Mamdani administration we doubt it very much, yes, but something will definitely happen. If measures are implemented to significantly increase taxes on corporations and real estate, combined with rent freezes and large-scale free programs, everything for free, New York is very likely to face an outflow of capital, businesses, and part of its population, primarily among wealthy residents and investors. The expected consequences for the city are as follows: an accelerated outflow of capital and businesses. Large companies, investment structures, banks, and some tech firms may start moving their headquarters, staff, and assets from New York to jurisdictions with less strict taxation, as has already happened with Californian and New York financial firms which choose either Florida or Texas. Forbes writes about this. Recent surveys estimate up to 1 million residents are ready to leave the city if there are major social changes and higher taxes. Moreover, these are people with an income of over $250,000 a year. This is the core of the city's tax base. Realistic estimates range from 300,000 to 2 million people over 2-3 years of reforms, if implemented. Those who directly influence tax revenues, wealthy families, top managers, and some information technology and finance specialists. But that's New York. Now let's talk a bit about what impact these elections and what will happen will have on the whole country. On the general national elections, the ideas of Democratic fascists like Mamdani, Ocasio, and Cortez and other Sanders types are not received with as much enthusiasm as they are in New York. By the way, we definitely need to talk separately about why the majority of Jews in New York City voted for communism, but that's a separate topic. It shows that people skilled in building, chess, movies, theater, and rockets can also fight well. Nevertheless, they can be absolute and complete fools when it comes to thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead in life. In chess, we do this, but not in real life, politics, or economics. We Jews turned out to be absolute and complete idiots. However, we have always been absolute and complete idiots in politics, economics, and public life. Let's remember that only 20% of Jews left Egypt. Not 100, not half, just 20%, and that's it. Well, by the way, we are all descendants of that 20%. But then things kept happening. Every generation is the same, almost like a selection process. Maybe every generation it's 2080. 2080. The 80 would fade away somewhere and the 20 would keep moving forward. These 20% would reproduce, and their offspring would again split into 80 and 20. But we'll touch on this topic some other time. So, ideas about Mamdani and reducing police funding. I mean, what does it mean to make things worse? To make the criminal environment worse, meaning to improve the lives of criminals, his plan to raise middle-class taxes, belief that Israel is our enemy, and view that Muslims are peaceful and kind, about the fact that all 70 times in the world people tried to build socialism and they failed. It happened because there were bad people who were building it, but now, finally, good people are trying to build it, and that's why everything will be completely different. The American heartland doesn't really understand who needs this nonsense. They need the government to protect them from dangers, not interfere with their lives, not drag them into wars, and give them the opportunity to pray to their God, or not pray to any God at all. That's for them to decide. They want their children to follow in their footsteps. They don't want them to change their gender from male to female or to something else entirely. Well, basically, that's what the supporters of Mamdani are proposing. Even free sausage won't make them vote for such a program. Therefore, from the perspective of presidential elections, such a program doesn't work. From the perspective of senatorial elections, most likely, just as there were blue states and red states, that's how it will remain. Because of major changes in California and the southern states, congressional districts for electing lower house members are being redrawn. In California, this adds 5 seats for Democrats, while in the South, if approved by the Supreme Court, it could give Republicans 12 to 19 more seats. The biggest task for the Republicans right now is to prevent the lower house from getting a Democratic majority. I believe that so far nothing has happened that would indicate the Republicans are going to lose their majority in either the lower or the upper house. I don't think that Democratic governors will be elected in the red states. But in order to make sure that the corrupt Democratic Party doesn't seize power again anytime soon, we need the country and the government to focus on improving the lives of Americans, not on our affairs abroad. As I already said in my first video, I'm not calling for us to stop dealing with foreign affairs. I'm calling for 90% of our time and effort to be spent here focusing on domestic affairs. Because if we bring peace to 2, 3, or even 5 more places, but lose the White House election in 2028, then all our efforts will be in vain. So, strengthen the foundation, build on the coalition that Trump created in 2024, expand it, and significantly improve the lives of Americans. That's the recipe for victory for 8 or maybe even 16 years ahead. Goodbye until we meet again.